Extinction of the American passenger pigeon. Probably the most terrible example of mass slaughter in the history of wildlife was not the bison, but the passenger pigeon, a story that almost defies belief. The passenger pigeon may have been the most abundant bird since Archaeopteryx fluttered its first feather back in the late Jurassic. John James Audubon rode the 55 miles from Henderson, Kentucky to Louisville one day in autumn 1813, and through the whole long day he rode under a sky darkened from horizon to horizon by a cloud of passenger pigeons. He estimated that more than 1 billion birds had passed over him. In 1866, a cloud of birds passed into southern Ontario. It was a mile wide, 300 miles long, and took 14 hours to pass a single point. Latter-day estimates suggest something in excess of 3.5 billion birds in that flock. The continental population may have been as high as 6 billion, a number that could represent anywhere from 25 to 40% of all the birds in North America 350 years ago. With these figures, it is almost impossible to imagine that such prodigious number of passenger pigeons were quickly reduced to just one individual Martha, who died in captivity at the Cincinnati Zoo in 1914. Multiple causes have been suggested for the extinction of the passenger pigeon. Historically, the primary cause was held to be the commercial exploitation of pigeon meat on a massive scale. The passenger pigeon has long been hunted. Even prior to colonization, Native Americans occasionally used pigeons for meat. In the early 1800s, commercial hunters began netting and shooting the birds to sell in the city markets as food, as live targets for trap shooting, and even as agricultural fertilizer. Once pigeon meat became popular, commercial hunting started on a prodigious scale. Pigeons were shipped by the boxcar to the eastern cities. In New York City in 1805, a pair of pigeons sold for 2 cents. Slaves and servants in 18th and 19th century America often saw no other meat. By the 1850s, the number of birds seemed to be decreasing, but still, the slaughter continued, accelerating to an even greater level as more railroads were developed after the American Civil War, which facilitated the transportation to urban areas. A state historical marker commemorates the events in her book, Birds That Hunt and Are Hunted, which documented that over 1 million birds from a single flock were exterminated at one time. One hunter was reputed to have personally killed 1 million birds and earned $60,000, the equivalent of $1 million today. Paul Eshrel says a single hunter sent 3 million birds to eastern cities. However, current estimation focuses on deforestation, which cleared the pigeons, massed food, and resulted in the breakdown of their social facilitation. Hunting of passenger pigeons decreased their numbers, especially since they laid only 1 egg a year. Yet, it is widely accepted that the deforestation of the land also played a role in the species' extinction. Since passenger pigeons required large tracts of unbroken forest to support their flocks, the passenger pigeon's technique of survival has been based on mass tactics. They traveled and reproduced in progenious numbers. satiating predators before any substantial negative impact was made in the bird's population. As their numbers decreased along with their habitat, the birds could no longer rely on high population density for protection. Without this mechanism, many ecologists believe the species could not survive. As the flocks dwindled in size, with the resulting breakdown of social facilitation, the species went beyond the point of recovery. Besides, the bird fed mainly on acorns, chestnuts, and beechnuts in the extensive woodlands of North America, and so, when these lands were steadily cut down and food supplies were reduced, the number of passenger pigeons also dropped quickly. And finally, the pigeons could not change their ways. Colonies of 100 to 500 or even 5,000 birds might have been able to survive. But the birds couldn't seem to reproduce successfully in such small groups. A passenger pigeon was too stressed to function unless it had millions of its fellows right in front of its face, which made the recovery of the species nearly impossible, so the passenger pigeon went extinct.